Hey friends, I thought it was time to talk about something that is often misunderstood or, yeah, misunderstood. And that is container fertilizer. What mistakes are most gardeners making and what actually works? Yeah, I get a lot of requests for things about container gardening because there's a lot of people that don't have space to put in a garden outdoors. Maybe they only have a patio, porch, or a balcony. But there's often, you see, I don't know, often people recommending the fertilizers, especially bloom boosters, for container plants. And we'll go over some facts that you really need to know to make a better choice or the best choice you can. Have you ever contended with container plants that should be thriving? You're doing what everybody else is doing, and yet they're not doing what you wanted them to do. So many people just assume when their container plants aren't performing that they need to add more fertilizer. In fact, many struggling plants are suffering not from a lack of fertilizer, but from the wrong kind applied the wrong way. So let's walk through the most common container fertilizer mistakes. I have my notes to read from and what actually works instead. So number one, using bloom booster fertilizers when you don't need them. So what are they? This is one of the biggest and most persistent myths in gardening. You see that all the time. You see bloom booster, that's what they're called. They're supposed to promote blooming in flowering plants, and you see it a lot in container planting. That is marketing. That is not true advice. So many gardeners will reach for these high phosphorus fertilizers, and that is, it has the big middle number. Let me get my fertilizer here. See, NPK right here, 3, 2, 1. The middle number, if it is much larger than the other two numbers, that's a high phosphorus fertilizer, and they're often marketed as bloom boosters. So they think that it's promoted as something that will help you produce more flowers on your plants. But here's what the science tells you. This isn't just me, this is the science. So flowering is controlled by genetics, light, and plant hormones. Phosphorus supports basic plant function, but it does not trigger blooming. So most potting mixes already contain sufficient phosphorus. But even more important, phosphorus does not leach out of containers quickly. It can build up over time. So too much phosphorus can block uptake of iron and other micronutrients. That's where you see yellowing of leaves. Right here, I was getting ahead of it. That causes yellowing of leaves, especially in petunias and calibrachoas. So it can reduce overall plant health. So what works better? Use a balanced fertilizer and focus on consistent care, not a bloom boost. We will get to what a balanced fertilizer really means. So number two, over-fertilizing, more is not better. So it's easy to think that if a little fertilizer is good, more must be better. But in containers, over-fertilizing can quickly lead to salt buildup in the soil. Now this is true of synthetic fertilizers. They're the ones that are pink or blue that you often see people using, especially for container plants, and especially on mini petunias. They can build up salts in the soil, root damage, burned leaf edges, and weak, overly lush growth with fewer flowers. And unlike garden beds, containers have nowhere for excess nutrients to go. What works better? Feed lightly and regularly instead of heavily and occasionally. And I watched a garden show, and this gal was growing the most beautiful containers. And many times in instructions on, especially synthetic fertilizers, will say every so many weeks or whatever. Now, what she did was every time she watered, she diluted, and she used an organic fertilizer, it to like half strength or quarter strength, and she's called it weekly, meaning it was once a week and a week solution. And yeah, that worked best for her, and she had the most beautiful plants. Plus, think about it, you save on fertilizer. Okay. So a diluted liquid fertilizer applied weekly or bi-weekly is often far more effective than larger doses. Number 3, this is really important. Forgetting that it's the nitrogen that leaches out quickly, not the phosphorus or the potassium. So most gardeners don't know this, and therefore that's why when someone tells them a bloom booster is what you need, the higher phosphorus, they will believe it. Nitrogen is highly mobile and washes out with watering. Because someone will say, oh, if it's too high a nitrogen, then you have a problem. That is true out in the garden, but in the containers, it is what, especially watering more frequently, it's the nitrogen that leaches out. But the phosphorus, it stays put. So when your container plants start to look pale or slow down, it is often a nitrogen deficiency, not a lack of phosphorus. I know that takes a lot of people by surprise. This is especially true in hanging baskets, fast draining pots, because we often are recommended to use well draining soil, right? So it drains fast. Warm summer conditions. So what works better? Use fertilizer that provides a steady stream of nitrogen, since that's the nutrient you're constantly losing. So number 4, feeding without enough light. This one is the one that's most overlooked. You can fertilize perfectly, but if your plants aren't getting enough light, they can't perform. And here's why. Flowers require energy, sugars, which are produced through photosynthesis. Low light, low energy equals fewer blooms. So no fertilizer can replace sunlight. What works better? Make sure flowering containers like petunias, geraniums, and verbena get at least 6 to 8 hours of sun. Now, I say this often because I'm often told in comments different things, but adjust to your circumstances, your gardening conditions. That is important as well. And sometimes trial and error is that, as far as how much sun your plants get. Number 5, ignoring the health of roots. Yes, healthy roots are the foundation of everything. And that is why I'll show you another product that I love using. Organic Rev. This stimulates root growth and the health of roots. And it's full of humic acids and other things. I have a whole video on it, and I especially love it when I first transplant things or whatever. It helps the microbes in the soil start talking to the roots of the plants. So that's my oversimplified version of it. But yes, even the best fertilizer won't help if your soil is compacted. And that can occur in a pot if, I know many people use potting soils that have peat or coconut coir in them, and those things become compacted over time. And that's why one of the reasons I've kind of eliminated them from my using them. So also, if your drainage is poor, that can occur, and sometimes that can occur from the roots becoming too full. They're root bound, and so that can plug up the holes, or it means it doesn't have anything to hold the water so that it can absorb it. I have a video on how I revived a potted petunia that has become leggy but also root bound, and it's really interesting how you can fix that. Especially if you buy containers that are filled with petunias already overflowing early in the season, about halfway into the season, like July maybe, all of a sudden they're just not performing. And it could very well be they are root bound. and you need to intervene for them so that they can survive the rest of the season. So the other caveat to that is if the roots are sitting in water. Now some containers, I have some that have a catch tray built into them. If you water, it holds the water there. If it holds it too long, then the roots are sitting in water, and that can choke out the oxygen. All you do with those, you can still use them, they work great, is after half an hour, if it still has water in it, pour it out. And all you have to do is tip the pot, it will run out of that tray and you're fine. The plant, if it's super hot, it will absorb all that water and use it, but sometimes it doesn't. If you get a lot of rain or other factors like that, then just make sure you pour off the water in the catch trays after half an hour, 20 minutes. So in these conditions, oxygen is limited, nutrient uptake is reduced, and plants decline no matter how much you feed them. So what works better? Well, you use well-draining potting mix, always. Ensure pots have drainage holes or the drainage holes have not become clogged. And you water thoroughly, then allow some drying between waterings. And as I said, pour off any excess water if it's in a catch tray. So number 6, using the same fertilizer all season without adjusting. Now, I will add an addendum after this. Plants don't have identical needs from spring through summer. So early on, they benefit from steady, balanced growth. Later in the season, heat, frequent watering, and rapid growth change how nutrients are used. But instead of switching to extreme bloom boosters, what plants really need is consistency and not extremism or extremes. What works better? Stick with a balanced fertilizer and adjust frequency or concentration, not formulation. That means don't go from a high nitrogen fertilizer to a high phosphorus, meaning you can use the same one, like this one. I would just, during heavier watering times, I wouldn't dilute it as much. And being organic, it does not build up the salts. So that's important to know. It is the synthetics that build up those salts and can burn plants as well as cause other issues that you may be unaware of. So if you take nothing else away from this, this is what your container plants actually need to keep them thriving. Number 1, use a balanced fertilizer. Like I said, we'll get to what that is in a minute. And feed lightly and consistently. Prioritize sunlight and root health. Understand the nitrogen is the nutrient that leaches out the fastest. And avoid unnecessary high phosphorus products. So a simple way to think about this, in containers, it is not about pushing the plants harder. It's about supporting them steadily. When you stop chasing quick fixes like bloom boosters, everything starts to fall into place. So this is one of those shifts that makes gardening feel more successful and even easier. So here's the thing on balanced fertilizers. I don't mean the numbers are even, like 10, 10, 10 across NPK numbers. So they're also not heavy on one nutrient, especially phosphorus. Your plants do best with steady, even nutrition, not a spike of one thing. So when choosing fertilizer for containers, look for numbers that are relatively close. 3, 2, 1. 3 is the nitrogen. That's what leaches out the fastest. That's why this one has a little bit more of the nitrogen. The other 2 is phosphorus and potassium. Avoid anything where the middle number is extremely or dramatically higher than the other numbers. Focus on consistency over intensity. And that will help you to grow your best container plants ever. You will find many, many ideas out there for container planting. Now, with many people, I don't do it because I just don't have any on hand and I rely on my organic fertilizer. Some people will use a slow release in their containers, and I prefer organic, of course, and that can help with consistency. because it slowly releases as it comes up. The plants do need to digest it, or it does need to be digested before the plants use it. So it's not going to give an immediate effect. It'll take 3 or 4 weeks before it starts breaking down enough to feed the plants. Just be aware of that. So as I said, I rely on good potting soil. I make my own with compost, perlite, wool pellets. This is something that provides moisture control, as well as, look, it has the nitrogen in it, and it breaks down slowly, feeds the nitrogen to the plant slowly. So this is natural, organic, and it helps to hold on to water. And, well, it actually calls it water holding fertilizer. I got this from Sonoma Wool Company, and it's made in the USA, and it's just sheep's wool pellets. Yeah, you can add that to your containers in place of a slow release fertilizer. And like I said, I'm just now trying that this year. I've heard rave reviews about it. I've seen many other gardeners using it. And yeah, it's the bee's knees. So I hope you enjoyed this video clarifying why bloom boosters are not the ticket to more flowers in your containers and what you can do to have the best display this year. I will see you in my next video where we will have more garden fun. And soon I will take you on another tour of what's going on in my garden. Today it's misty and cold, so I'm focused on videos, making videos rather than working out in the garden. But I know it's supposed to warm up, and I'm going to be getting out there and putting all my plants out that I have started in here from cuttings and seeds. And we're going to get that new cottage garden put in and revamped after the tree smushed it. So all that being said, I will see you in my next video.